Back-to-back days live for you guys. If you didn't tune in last night, I did a post show for AEW Double or Nothing, which was a very good show. Today was the last show of this Tampa takeover that WWE has had for the last couple of shows. They had Roadblock, Saturday night's main event, and now Monday Night Raw as the last stand for this Tampa loop. This was the follow-up show for Saturday night's main event. If you watched that show, you saw that a lot of things went down. You saw that Bronson Reed was the new addition of this deadly alliance that Paul Heyman is forming, and there was multiple different Money in the Bank qualifier matches that were setting up Money in the Bank, which will be June 7th, which I'll be going live immediately following the show to deliver a post show for that as well. But this was a show that was all right, not trying to be too, blunt or too, negative about it, but this really wasn't anything special. Following up Saturday night's main event, which also was pretty much kind of a subpar show. WWE is kind of in a little bit of a funk right now when it comes to the quality of their shows because honestly, man, the vibe is not at the best that it's been. There's been kind of an up and down flow with it. There's been very high morale when it comes to the fan base, heading into WrestleMania following the John Cena heel turn. But now it kind of feels like things are kind of in a lull. If I didn't say it to begin, guys, this is Kevin Zwicker from the Fast Count. Please remember to like the video and subscribe. Like the video and subscribe. Like the video and subscribe. Hitting the like button for this live really does help, and it's free. Hitting the subscribe button also is free, and it really helps. But they started off the show with a Seth Rollins promo. And heading into the show, I thought it was going to be very important for them to establish and make logical sense as to why Bronson Reed is a member of this new Deadly Alliance. I thought that following Saturday night's main event, we're going to maybe get this expansive explanation as to why it makes sense. But nope, they went the predictable route and basically stated the fact that Seth Rollins got a wicked case of the beats from Bronson Reed multiple different times. So Seth Rollins respects that and added him to the group, which makes no logical sense in any type of way, right? If I had a guy who I worked with and was constantly beating my ass or gave me a sick beatdown, I would never turn around and sit there and be like, you know what, man? You kicked my ass really good. Let's be friends. But we're here, right? This is professional wrestling, not a regular work environment. So they start off the show with Paul Heyman giving a very distinct intro to all three men in this alliance. Started off with Braun Breaker. He had a Terminator reference, which is one of my all-time favorite movies. You can make a valid argument that Terminator 2 is the greatest sequel to ever happen. Dark Knight is kind of in that conversation with me as well as my two favorite movies of all time. But I feel like that's a little bit of a separate thing. Feels more like a part two than a sequel. This feels like a different thing. It's kind of hard to explain it when I break it down like that, right? A little bit convoluted, but in my mind, it makes a little bit more sense. But he's talking about Braun Breaker, and he said if Skynet was real and they were going to send a Terminator, that they were going to sit there and predict and let you know that the main event of WrestleMania 50, 49, 48, 47, we're all going to feature Braun Breaker. He said that this is a ass kicker. This is a guy who comes from a bloodline. Remember that bloodline of ass kickers, and was really hyping up Braun Breaker. Then he went on to Bronson Reed, spoke about how Bronson Reed, before he got injured, was giving the beats to Seth Rollins, and he gave him such a bad case of the beats that he gave him a case worse than guys like Roman Reigns, guys like CM Punk have, and because of that, that is why he's in the fold now. And these guys were all draped in Versace, draped in Gucci. They were all looking very, very expensive in that ring. Then Paul Heyman goes on to Seth Rollins, praising him for being the architect, the visionary that he is. And basically, the whole point of this promo was for Seth Rollins to come out and announce that he is going to be a part of the qualifier for Money in the Bank. They go on to talk about this grand plan, this vision that they've had for the most couple of weeks that they've repeated ever since they formed. And he goes on to talk about with power comes the titles, and you need the titles to gain the power. And then he goes on to talk about how these guys are basically going to be the future of professional wrestling, and they are forming this over their vision, right? And you could tell throughout this promo that they were dropping hints at Roman Reigns. It's looking like that we're eventually, whether it's going to be at the Saudi show, or maybe if they want to delay it for a show like SummerSlam, which I don't think that they can, we're going to get this big time multi-man match where you're going to have CM Punk, Sami Zayn, and Roman Reigns go up against this new Deadly Alliance. Now, like I said, the timetable for this is going to be kind of, wonky, because as we all know, Roman Reigns works maybe 4 to 5 matches a year. So you can never really tell when this is going to take place. If I had to bet, I would say it's going to be at the Saudi show, because that's where you get the big bucks. So that's where you're going to get a star like Roman Reigns to be there. But this was a solid way to open up the match, right? Open up the show. First match of the night is a triple threat qualifier for the Money in the Bank. We have Penta, we have Dragon Lee, and we had Chad Gable. Now, going into this, I think it was pretty predictable that Penta was going to win, because if you guys don't know, Chad Gable has a match earlier in the day against Vikingo, which they spoiled this basically as to what's going to go down at the next AAA show. They announced that this is going to be for the AAA Mega Championship, which if you don't know, Alberto Del Rio is the current holder of that title. But now, since they announced that the title is going to be on the line at Worlds Collide, it pretty much spoils it that that Vikingo is going to win the title, and Alberto Del Rio is going to be thrown to the wayside, which I'm sure there's going to be a lot of people who are happy about that, right? But this was a very solid match. Depending on with all these three competitors, you knew there was going to be a banger. Chad Gable is one of the more underrated wrestlers on the roster. Penta, since he's joined the WWE, has fit in like a glove. He's been able to really showcase his abilities. You can't really say that much about his brother, Ray Phoenix. He's taken a couple pins since he joined the WWE, and I'm pretty sure that every single week he has his fingers crossed that WWE is eventually going to reunite him with his brother, because right now, as a single star, things aren't looking so good for Ray Phoenix. But these guys went very back and forth. Chad Gable showed off his stuff. You had Ray Phoenix show off his stuff. You had Dragon Lee show off his stuff. There's multiple times throughout this match where everybody kind of had their time to shine. Chad Gable was able to showcase what he was doing. They showed off that Vikingo is on ringside. As soon as they showed that Vikingo was going to be out on the ringside, you knew that he was going to factor in this match one way or the other. And once they were brawling on the outside, you had Chad Gable and Vikingo interact. Chad Gable put his hands on him. Then at one point of the match, you had Chad Gable up on the turnbuckle. Vikingo kicked him in the head. You had Dragon Lee eat a Mexican destroyer, and then you saw Chad Gable get dropped on his head by Penta, which there was some color that popped up when that happened. Chad Gable was literally dropped on his freaking head, so you know that had to hurt. He was busted open the hard way. 1, 2, 3, Penta picked up the W. He is going to be in the Money in the Bank match, which Penta, ladders, Money in the Bank. You're going to see a lot of crazy shit go down in that match, right? Next, we show off the segment going down with the Judgment Day. They're backstage in the clubhouse, and you had Roxanne Perez deliver some chicken nuggets to Dominic Mysterio, which they're fumbling, man. Dominic is a chicken tender man, not a chicken nugget man. There is a big difference between the two, all right? I love me some nuggets as well, but a chicken tender is not a chicken nugget. Two very separate items, right? Guys, if you haven't, make sure to hit the like button and subscribe. It really helps the channel out in more ways than you even know. But you're having this point where you're having Roxanne offer up the nuggets to Dominic Mysterio, and then you hear in the background, Konnichiwa, bitches, which, if you know, that's Japanese. I didn't know. Liv Morgan was filming a movie in Japan, so this was her return to WWE, because I guess she's done filming that. And you had the confrontation, right? You had Liv, you had Roxanne, you got the face-to-face, and you had basically what was revealed when you saw these two be involved. Dominic was stammering, didn't know what he was doing, and Liv basically revealed that Raquel was informing her of everything that has gone down. She's still very much in the loop, and she will take care of this when it's time to take care of it. But she has to go to speak to Adam Pearce to get a Money in the Bank qualifying match. Sets up a very interesting dynamic that played in later on in the show that I will get to later on when it's time to get to it. Next, we got Tozawa versus Rusev. And look, we already knew what this was going to be, right? It was obvious that when this was set up, it wasn't going to be a legitimate match. It was going to be a setup for a certain angle. That's exactly what we got. We got Tozawa trying to fight early, but within like maybe a minute, you had Rusev put him in the accolade, have him choking out, passes out, wins easily within like 2 minutes. Rusev doesn't want to let go. Then you hear Sheamus's music, and before Sheamus's music hit, the crowd was dead silent. Like they could have cared less as to what was going to go down. I think pretty much because they knew that there was no way in hell Tozawa was going to win. So why even waste our breath, right? But you had Sheamus make the save. You had a stare down between Rusev and Sheamus. The League of Nations lives. Once you're in the league, you're always in the league. But you saw them stare down. You saw Rusev, walk out of the ring, stare down from the ramp. We got a tease of a potential match between these two guys, which we all know is going to be a banger. Something I look forward to. Two big, meaty men slapping meat together in the middle of that ring. Big pause on that, but that should be very exciting for the future. Guys, if you haven't hit the subscribe button, please do so. It's very free. If you haven't, please hit the like button. It helps a lot as well. But before we move on to the actual wrestling, we see a backstage segment where we have Bert Kreischer and Tom Segura, two very famous comedians. I personally don't find them that funny at all, but they're all right. They do that, that white boy frat humor, which is okay. But they have a very successful podcast that they had Cody Rhodes on there, and you had Kathy Kelly basically, tell Tom, Tom, your guy has been pretty negative about pro wrestling. It's surprising to see you here. And Tom says, I have said some things that I probably shouldn't have said, but ever since we've had Cody Rhodes on our pod, my mind has really changed, and I'm here to enjoy it. Yeah, Bert Kreischer go to off camera, and then he calls Tom, and then we see a segment where he has his shirt off. If you guys don't know, Bert Kreischer does his stand-up shirtless. He's a very hairy and very burly man. And he sees the War Raiders. They basically scream at each other, and Bert gets uncomfortably red, which I'm not even exaggerating when I say uncomfortably red. He looked like the Kool-Aid Man, which is, I didn't even know a human being could get that red. But it looked like the man needed some help. He needed some medical attention because I've never seen a human being become that red. And he almost had a heart attack on screen. But luckily, his friend Tom Segura took him away. They were there promoting their stand-up specials on Netflix. I think Tom Segura also has a normal TV show on there. But like I said, man, I don't really find those guys too funny, But hey, everybody, whatever floats your boat. Next, we get a three-way for the tag team championship between the New Day, the War Raiders, and American Made. The New Day, they have been a lot more interesting as of late when they've turned heel. I think that they ran their course as baby faces. They were baby faces for so long. There really wasn't anything else that they could do. And I remember when they first formed that they were heels. And I found that interesting. That was probably my favorite version of the New Day. When they first were introduced, before they were throwing pancakes and having those unicorns strapped on their heads that looked like dildos, I think that was my favorite version of the New Day when they were initially introduced and they were initially on their heel runs, right? This was a very interesting matchup between the three teams. You knew that going into this match, you were going to have two heel teams. We're going to team up against the one babyface team. That was pretty much what went down. They had this alliance between the New Day and American Made, trying to get the War Raiders out there as quickly as they possibly can. And that's pretty much what they did. There was a spot in the match where you had Ivar and Kofi Kingston interacting. And Kofi hit the LED lights where they don't even have ring aprons anymore. It's just LED lights. And it looks like they were kind of like malfunctioning, right? You saw the lights flickering off in and out. But since you had the New Day and American Made having this alliance, Xavier Woods was able to hit the okie doke, head a roll up on one of the American-made guys. 1, 2, 3. They retain their championships. New Day are still healing it up with gold. Then we see a backstage segment between Liv Morgan, Raquel Rodriguez, Kairi Sane, and the women's champion Io Sky. It looks as if Liv and Raquel were going to look for Adam Pearce's office, but they stopped and saw the champion in Kairi. We got a match set up later on in the night between Liv and Kairi out of this segment, which you're not going to see me complain about. Two very elite hoopers, if you know what I mean. Then we get Jey Uso coming out, right? You see Jey Uso coming out in the crowd. I think one of the nicest things, whether you like Jey Uso or you don't, or you're a fan of his work or you're not, it's the faces that you see the kids get when he'll sit there and he'll pull one of the kids out in the crowd and doing the yeet thing with it. You could see their joy in their eyes. It is kind of like the modern day version of when Brett would put his glasses on the kids. You see just the twinkle in their eyes. It's a very sweet thing to see, right? Very nice for him to do as a performer because he doesn't have to do that, right? But he's coming out there and he's recapping basically how he's a wanted man. He recapped what went down at Saturday night's main event. He has all these people gunning for the title. Had Logan Paul gunning for it. John Cena's in the weeds. You got Seth Rollins that's talking about this plan. And before he could really get into it, we get interrupted by Gunther, the ring general. If you guys don't remember, they have a rematch set. I think the Raw after Money in the Bank. So you had Gunther come out and he's congratulating Jey Uso, congratulated him and his brother Big Jim on there being 15 years of the Usos being in the WWE. He also congratulated him on his first successful title retention against Logan Paul at Saturday night's main event. He also admits that he didn't think that Jey Uso was going to be champion still at this point. And he talks about how, Jay's this very loyal guy, right? How, if his friends need him, he's there. If his family needs him, he's there. And it makes him a very good quality human being. But that's what's going to make him not a good champion. A champion is somebody who needs to be very selfish. A champion is somebody who basically needs to be very cutthroat. And Gunther, he says he's somebody who only cares about himself. And that's what makes him such a great champion. Gunther has been champion in WWE for 80% of the time that he's been there. And you have Jey Uso kind of rebuttal. And it looks like he's stammering and stifling. Doesn't really know what to say. When things like that happen, it really only means two things in my mind. Either he forgot what somebody wrote down for him, or he is speaking off of the cuff. And I think that Jey Uso, since he's been in WWE for so long, I'm going to go mostly with he's speaking off of the cuff. And Jey Uso comes out and he admits, he's like, you know what, man? I'm tired of people telling me, that I help people out too much. I'm tired of people telling me what I can and can't do. I'm tired of all of these people doubting me. And when we have our rematch, I am going to choke you out again. Does his signature yeet. That's the end of the segment. I think that if you were a betting person, I would say that it's probably more than likely that Jey Uso is going to come out the victor. You got Jason Luba saying Jey Uso bombed that promo. I don't know if it's bombing. I think what it is like what I just said. I think that he was speaking off of the cuff. There's certain wrestlers that that they have promos written out for them. And I think that Jey Uso is one of those guys who they don't write for him. So I think that he was really in the ring collecting what he was going to say next. I think that Gunther, obviously, if you had to say who got the best of the two in that promo, it would be Gunther, because I think him and Braun Breaker are the two elite guys in WWE who are on the come up. Outside of the established main event scene, guys like Punk, Rollins, and Roman, I think Gunther and Braun are the next two guys up. So it's kind of hard to go, wit for wit with him, but that's what I think it was. I think it was more likely that Jay was just figuring out what he's going to say more because they don't write for him, which is kind of normal. If you went back and forth with anybody and, what we used to call it in school, roast battles, like when you would joke each other, sometimes there was guys who would get caught, and they had to take a second to say what they were going to say. Next, we move on to Kairi versus Liv Morgan. And this is where the drama was going to take place between this Judgment Day, now that they have Roxanne Perez in the mix. You knew that once we saw earlier in the night where you saw the tensions brewing between Roxanne and Liv. That there was something that was going to happen that was going to extend that story. That's exactly what we got from here. Kairi, since she's came back, she was one of my favorite in-ring talents when it came to prior to her injury. It's always good to see Kairi and Io. I think they're probably in-ring wise, outside of Charlotte Flair and Bianca, are probably the two best in-ring workers in the women's division. Becky, she's in that conversation as well, but I think that Kyrie and Io are pretty safely in that conversation as well. Very back and forth, but we saw what took place at the end, where this is where things really started to get sticky. You saw Roxanne trying to help. Finn brought her in to be backup for Liv because all of the members of the Judgment Day have backup, but Liv only had Raquel. You see Roxanne trying to do that. She pushed Kyrie off of the turnbuckle, and then you see Raquel on the side arguing with Roxanne, basically saying, we don't need your help. You don't need to be out here. You have Liv get caught up in that, and you see Liv try to hit Oblivion on Kyrie. She's distracted, gets a roll up. 1, 2, 3. Liv loses. A shocking result. I think most people, if you were a betting person, would have had Kyrie going in there taking the L, but she gets a big-time win against a big-time opponent on Monday Night Raw. Good for her. Further along that story, you saw Raquel and Roxanne basically look at each other like, oh shit, we know when we get backstage, it is going to be hell. That's what we got. We got the follow-up segment between them in the back by the Judgment Day clubhouse. You see them arguing, but you see the shocking, reveal by Liv where she says, you know what, Raquel? You were the veteran in this situation, so it's your fault. You can see the cracks, right? I think, and you see Finn, smiling the whole time, cackling like a hyena. I think eventually what we're going to see is we're going to see like this rift between Raquel and Liv. And it's going to be because of Roxanne. And we're going to get to a point where there's going to be a closer knit relationship between Roxanne and Liv. And Raquel's going to be the one who's going to be on the way out, right? I think that's where the direction that we're going. Further along as weeks starting to go by with Raquel being somebody who's kind of hovering over the Judgment Day, that's what I think we're going to see, right? Then we have Lyra Valkyrie, the women's IC champion, come out. She announces that at Money in the Bank, it is going to be a rematch between her and Becky Lynch. She's talked about that throughout her career, that, once she has an opponent, it's never really personal between her and that opponent. What goes down between them and those ropes, it's really just that. And after the match, there's no hard feelings. And the ultimate victory for her is winning the match. And after that, she moves on to the next opponent. And she talks about how Becky at Judgment Day, if you guys remember at Judgment Day, things got very hot and tempted between these two, very personal. You had Lyra's fiance at ringside. You saw Becky get in his face. If you guys don't know, that's probably one of the more in-demand indie wrestlers out there. I know a lot of people online were pretty weird about it because, he just looks like a normal guy to me. But you know how people can be on the internet. Then you have Becky come out there. And she says, because Becky was really getting ran down by Lyra. She was talking about how Becky's an opportunist. She whines now. She very much twists people's arm into getting what she wants. And you have Becky come out and defending herself, saying, if you remember at NXT, after our match, I raised your hand. And that's what I want at Money in the Bank. It was also stated that at Money in the Bank, if Becky doesn't defeat Lyra, that will be her last time gunning for that title as long as Lyra is a champion. We've seen this in professional wrestling so many different times. That could mean basically if Lyra is a champion for the next month, Becky could easily challenge for it, who the next champion is the following month. That is not as permanent of a stipulation as they make it out to be, but in professional wrestling, there's always loopholes, right? It's always loopholes. There's always, fake retirements or always, ways to work around those things. I think that this is going to be a very solid match between these two, because if you would have asked me what was the best match on the Judgment Day card, I believe that the best match between Lyra and Becky was the one that stole the show. Guys, if you haven't, hit the like button and subscribe. Remember, it's always free. There's a lot of you watching these things that can do all these different crazy TikTok edits, that can do all these crazy Photoshops. So you can't tell me if you're able to do that. You are not able to hit the simple like and subscribe button if you haven't. Next, before we get into the main event of the show, which is that triple threat qualifying match for the Money in the Bank between Seth Rollins, Sami Zayn, and Finn Balor. All three guys who you could make a case deserve to be in that match. We see Sami Zayn walking into the hallway, going to his match, but he's stopped by Karrion Kross. And this segment probably lasted maybe 30 seconds most. Bert Kreischer and Tom Segura got more airtime on Raw than Karrion Kross did. And I know that's not going to sit very well with a lot of people because this whole TKO era has been a lot of pandering in my mind. It's a lot of pandering to the people who go to these WWE shows that pay for these $40,000 seats, that it's coming across now like this is a show that rich people go to flex, or Netflix and TKO use to plug different celebrity vehicles, whether it's shows or movies or whatever. But things are becoming a little less normal people friendly. And I don't even want to say normal. I don't know what would be the proper way to address that when I say normal people. But it's not, it feels as if it's going a little bit away from its blue collar roots and becoming much more posh, right? And a guy who like Karrion Kross, who's been a constant merch seller, it feels a bit strange that we're getting comedians who aren't wrestlers more on air time than wrestlers who are kind of moving units at the moment, right? But you have Karrion Kross stop Sami Zayn, and he says, Sami, you know, you really made this the hard way. You know, you could have easily went on SmackDown, had a title shot, but you want to sit there and make this the hard way. And you have Sami Zayn basically dismiss him and said, man, I ain't got time to hear this, right? And while he's walking away, you have Karrion Kross tell him, say, Sami, you're never going to be champion. And that catches Sami's attention. He tells Karrion that he is going to deal with him later. We get to the main event, the triple threat Money in the Bank qualifiers. Three elite hoopers when it comes to their in-ring work: Seth Rollins, Sami Zayn, and Finn Balor. Three guys who we all know can go. And it didn't disappoint in ring-wise. You saw these three guys do what they do best, and that is just go out there and do their thing. But at the end of the match, it came and it became an interference fest. You know, you had all the members of Seth Rollins' new Dangerous Alliance come. You had Jey Uso, the world champion, come in and interfere in that. You had Dirty Dom come in and interfere, which is strange because we haven't seen Dirty Dom interfere in any of the Judgment Days matches of lately. So this was kind of a shocking thing to see. We have Dom throw in a steel chair in the middle of the ring, but he had a bad throw. He was trying to get it to Finn, but he botched it. Seth Rollins was able to use that and stomp Finn Balor's head on the steel chair. 1, 2, 3. Seth Rollins has qualified for the Money in the Bank, making him one step closer to being able to accomplish this grand scheme, this grand plan that they have discussed on multiple different occasions. We hear CM Punk's music hit. Braun Breaker and Bronson Reed walk up to the ramp waiting on Punk, but Punk comes from the crowd, hits a GTS to Seth Rollins. Nighty-night, Sethy. CM Punk runs into the crowd. We end the show with CM Punk doing the go-to-sleep gesture, and that's how we end it. This was the last night of the Tampa takeover, and they ended it with CM Punk putting Seth Rollins to sleep, right? We got some things in the show that progressed the storylines. We got the new addition of Bronson Reed into this Deadly Alliance, which should make for some interesting TV. Like I said, I thought the explanation of him getting into the Alliance wasn't all that great. I feel as if they were in the creative meeting and they thought, you know what would be cool? If we added Bronson Reed to this group. But we don't know how we're going to be able to do it. But hey, we're just going to tell people, give them the slapstick, explanation as to why why he's in it. They're going to turn their brains off and they're just going to enjoy it, which I did a video earlier about that, talking about, kind of comparing it to the Fast and Furious movies. If you guys have seen any of those movies, every single thing that they do defies logic, but you don't take it that serious. You just turn your brain off and enjoy. And I think that's what TKO and WWE are asking you to do for this reasoning as to why Bronson Reed is in it. You already heard Triple H say that, during the lead up to WrestleMania. Stop watching it as a critic and be a fan. Basically telling you, hey, shut the hell up and just watch the show. That's pretty much what we got. But it was a solid show. It wasn't that bad. I think that what's really helping Raw, even when it's weeks that it's not the best show, is the fact that it's not 3 hours like SmackDown. Now that show sucks right now. It is the drizzling shits at the moment. And we just found out that it's going to be extended to 3 hours a little bit longer, which I don't know how that's a positive at all. And I think that the longer they extend it to be 3 hours, it's just gonna come down to it's gonna be 3 hours permanent. And I don't think 3 hours for any wrestling show on a weekly basis is a good thing. But that's just me rambling, right? That has nothing to do with Raw. But solid show, guys. Wasn't anything crazy, wasn't bad, but it was pretty solid. And I'll be here going off immediately after Dynamite. Right now, wrestling is ice cold. I don't know, man. I don't think it's ice cold. I just think maybe WWE is at the moment. I don't know if you watch AEW at all or if you're a fan of it at all. And anytime I say anything positive, people want to jump down my throat. But Double or Nothing last night was really good. That was a really good show. So I just think right now WWE is kind of John Cena's heel turn's not working. Dude, immediately after this, I was gonna record a video about it. But since we're here, I'm gonna talk about it. I think the initial moment when we got the heel turn, right? Where we got The Rock and Travis Scott next to him. You got these three Hollywood heavyweights. Obviously, The Rock is the biggest movie star in the world. Travis Scott is one of the best-selling rappers in the world. So I know people wanted to not really, ask why is he there. I think from that standpoint, it kind of made sense. Three successful men, right? But after that, it feels as if every single thing that they have done has been a misstep. And the fact that at Money in the Bank, we're going to have him teaming up with Logan Paul against Jey Uso and Cody Rhodes, it's just like, who asked for that? Nobody asked for that. I think when everybody started fantasy booking in their mind, when they accepted the idea that we're going to get a heel John Cena, I think everybody kind of thought in their mind that this is going to be kind of like an NWO 2.0 type of thing, where you're going to have The Rock, John Cena, and occasionally Travis Scott just run roughshod, through the roster. But it has been dreadful. I don't want to sit there and say that he needs to turn face immediately. But the sooner we get that again, I think the better. Because once it was announced that John Cena was going on a retirement tour, I don't think that many people wanted to see a heel turn. But when we got it, I think people were excited because it was going to be something that's fresh and new. But it has not been good at all. And I'm starting to think that it was a call that was above Triple H's head. Because if you watch that interview that The Rock had with Pat McAfee, he discussed how he originally wanted Cody Rhodes to be the one heel, which would have been a disaster. It would have been a disaster. So I think the caveat was to have John Cena. Like that was going to be the compromise. But I don't think that they really wanted John Cena to be the heel either. And I think Cena himself is personally enjoying it. But the on-screen product that we're getting is not good. I do agree that the Naomi heel turn is a lot better. Jason, I do believe that I've talked about that too. About how the needs for alternatives are so important in professional wrestling, because prior to AEW's existence, it was either you watch and accepted the product that WWE was giving you at the time, which was bad, or you just don't watch wrestling anymore. And now that AEW is there, I know that there's a lot of people that like to shit on it, which is fine. Different strokes for different folks. Everybody likes what they like. Me, as somebody who does wrestling content, I have to find things I like about both. It's really hard for me to choose a side. But with Double or Nothing being such a good show last night, it really emphasized in my mind again, how important it is for us to have legitimate alternatives because of the kind of bad stretch that we're getting with WWE at the moment. Kevin says, give me AJ Styles versus John Cena at Money in the Bank. Sounds more interesting. Man, you're seeing a lot of rumors online, and I don't know where this is coming from, that AJ Styles' contract is running up. If you notice a pattern of when these contracts are signed, they kind of announce it, or they're kind of, rumors bubbling already that it's either close or it's happening soon. But like, we haven't heard anything about AJ, but we saw, him interacting with Chad Gable. So I'm assuming that he's going to re-sign with WWE. He's never said anything about wanting to leave. But I know most people fantasize about him being in AEW. There's rumors, people saying that he's going to be at All In. Doubt it. Doubt it. But if you paid attention, throughout the last like 6 months or even a year, the two people who people have always fantasy booked about being in AEW was always Kevin Owens and AJ Styles. I don't see it happening with either of those guys, especially Kevin Owens with him resigning and that neck injury that he's gotten. It's not even 100% guaranteed that he's going to wrestle ever again. So I think that whole AJ Styles and AEW thing kind of needs to be put in the bed, right? Jason also says, John Cena's heel turn just isn't doing it, but you got to blame Dwayne with the start and stop BS. Now, if Dwayne was part of the heel turn, I think it would go a lot better. The Rock, I said this prior to his return last year. Anytime The Rock had a movie that flopped, or he had like a PR mishap, or anything was going on in his wrestling career, his acting career that wasn't going in the most positive direction, the place where he could go, where he could basically take a dump in the middle of the ring and he was going to be treated like gold, was The Rock, was wrestling, right? And I feel like he's always kind of used wrestling as that one place where it's like, I can fail anywhere else, but no matter what, wrestling, I'm always going to be the king. And I feel like he's kind of abused that to the point to where people can see it now. And this whole start and stop thing that he's doing with the WWE, it feels as if The Rock comes in, right, down these days and says, and just without warning, right, says, hey, I'm going to come in this day. We're going to shoot this big, impactful angle. I may or I may not stick around for it, but whatever goes down, whatever is the collateral damage that comes out of this, you guys are going to have to pick up the pieces and make logical sense. Which, if you're Triple H, you have to be pulling out what little hair you have left on your head, because how frustrating is that? I think that was extremely frustrating with the way that WrestleMania ended, where you had John Cena and Travis Scott being the two guys in the middle of the ring. I know that The Rock did that Pat McAfee interview where he tried to do damage control, saying that, hey, I didn't want to be there because it was going to take away from John Cena winning 17. But I think that the fact that he wasn't there took away from it more, because that's the main thing that people were talking about after the show. It wasn't 17. It was, why wasn't The Rock there? So I feel like he's just spitting a lot of BS. Nobody knows if AJ Styles wants to stay with WWE. We don't. We don't. I don't know the guy. I don't have personal conversations with him on a daily basis. You're right. But just from the interviews that he's given and the multiple interviews that he's given throughout the years, he's never really expressed, wanting to leave. And I can't say that the guy is lying, right? Because I don't know, but there's nothing that he's expressed that he's wanted to leave. So I'm just taking him at his word right now, right? Right. Jason also says, I thought Karrion was in a semi-program with AJ, but I missed about 4 weeks worth of any type of wrestling. Felt about Karrion Kross under WrestleMania YouTube thing. Was doing something to sink his teeth in. Man, I was when he was Killer Kross, I thought he was doing great in TNA. TNA, even in that time period, I thought they weren't producing very good TV. I still don't think they're producing very good TV, no matter what type of alliance they have with NXT. It's better, not that great. But I thought that he was great, man. And even now, I think the fact that he has something to wear, that he's doing something interesting. I thought that, he kind of pulled a reverse Samson when he grew his hair. I was like, oh, he doesn't have the same aura. But now he's doing a lot of interesting things. I think that, like you said earlier, that promo that he had was great. I think that people are starting to really get behind him. He is selling merch, which is something that catches WWE's attention very much. If you haven't noticed, which I'm sure multiple people have noticed, the one thing that motivates TKO right now, more so than fan reception, more so than clicks on the internet, is the almighty dollar. And if you have any type of, money that you could spare and you are a fan of Karrion Kross, I strongly suggest you buy a t-shirt if you want to see more stuff with him involved, because that's the ultimate motivator for TKO is money, right? You know, The Rock's still mad about not getting the main event, that WrestleMania match against Roman Reigns. I don't think that match is ever going to happen. I don't think that match is ever going to happen now. I think that time is starting to really catch up, right? Roman Reigns talked about in the Vanity Fair interview leading up to this WrestleMania main event where he was in the triple threat that he mainly only has 1 or 2 more years left before he transitions into Hollywood. If you guys don't know, he is in talks to be in the live action Street Fighter movie. So that's probably a role that if he lands and sticks and people like, it's going to lead up to more opportunities. He's probably going to get more opportunities anyways because, you know, the guy is looks like a movie star already, right? So I don't think we're going to get that match with The Rock. The Rock is going to be busy throughout this year. He has that Smashing Machine movie, you know, that movie that's about Mark Kerr, one of the founding fathers of the UFC, was one of the big dogs in the early days, if you don't know. Phenomenal documentary if you've never seen it, if you're into that stuff like me, who's a nerd. And it sounds as if that movie is going to do very well because that's an A24 film, and he's already locked up another role with A24, which to me is a good indicator that they have a lot of faith in this movie that's going to be very good. So he already is having another movie lined up with them. He also has the Martin Scorsese movie coming up, which anytime Martin Scorsese drops a movie, it's going to be a banger. So the guy is going to be very busy with those things. So I don't really see him being able to fit in that match with Roman Reigns in his schedule. I think that's going to be just like how it was with Sting and The Undertaker, where it's like, it's going to be a match that's going to be in our heads that we're probably never going to see. Where is the evidence about cross-selling merchandise? You can check it out. He's doing very well when it comes to the actual arena shows. You see reports coming out from guys like Sean Ross Sapp. Now, don't kill me. You're going to be like, oh, that's Sapp, right? I'm not an insider. I just talk about stuff online. But he's coming out and saying that that his merch is doing very well. Probably not as well as somebody like Jey Uso, obviously, or John Cena or Cody Rhodes. But he's doing – it's enough to where people are talking about it online, right? If he was selling nothing, reports like that wouldn't come out. And I know that a lot of us, when it comes to the dirt sheets, we kind of tend to want to believe who we think is right or what we think is right, or we don't want to take it as gospel, which is fine. I don't think you should take any dirt sheet writer as gospel, but word is coming around that he's selling pretty decently, right? And it's interesting. I like carrying, man. Anytime with any wrestling company, when you offer something that's different, because in professional wrestling, you know, we've seen the same thing at least a million different times in a million different packages, different remixes or whatever. I always tend to like it. Reminds me a little bit of Sean O'Hara. You know, the thing that he's doing right now, a little bit. You can see a little similarities. But anyways, guys, getting a little bit late. I will be live immediately following AEW Dynamite, which should be cool too. You know, that's the follow-up show for Double or Nothing. NXT's tomorrow. We're going to talk a little bit about that, you know, what goes down there. But guys, if you haven't hit the like button, if you haven't hit the subscribe button, like I said earlier, it's very free. Doesn't cost you a dime, and it helps the channel out in more ways than you even know. Guys, I am Kevin Zwicker. I'm out.